Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. Most victories don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, sit in the corner, and make everyone uncomfortable. That's the part nobody tells you. Not because it's secret, but because it exposes something awkward. Communities don't always celebrate growth when it doesn't follow the script. They clap for predictable success. They cheer for loud effort. They understand struggle when it looks familiar. What they don't know how to handle is someone who improves without permission, without drama, and without asking to be believed first. Here's a fact that rarely gets discussed. Studies on social dynamics consistently show that people reassess your value after results, not effort. Hard work earns sympathy. Outcomes earn authority. That's why the moment you surprised everyone, the tone changed. Conversation shifted. Compliments became careful. Suddenly, people who barely noticed you started remembering your name like it was always on their tongue. Funny how that works. And let's be honest, some of that new respect isn't admiration. It's shock wearing a polite face. Because when you succeed quietly, you force a mirror into the room. You don't say a word, but your progress starts asking questions nobody wants to answer. About time wasted, about comfort zones defended like sacred ground, about how many goals were postponed until someday and then quietly buried. There's even a bit of dark humor in it. The same people who once told you to take it easy now tell others, I always knew they had it in them. Suddenly you've been upgraded in hindsight. Retroactive belief is very popular these days. It's low effort and comes with zero risk. This isn't a story about being praised. It's about becoming undeniable, about how one person's unexpected rise can disrupt an entire community's hierarchy without raising their voice. About what really happens when you outgrow the version of yourself people felt comfortable underestimating, and why, long before the applause catches up, you're already being labeled something powerful in rooms you're not even in yet, the unsung champion. Number one, you disrupted the story they had already finished writing about you. People don't just observe others, they quietly assign them roles. Someone is the promising one, someone is the struggler, someone is the talker, and someone is the one who will never quite get there. Once that story is written, it becomes comfortable. It helps people predict the future without paying close attention. That's the story they had written about you, and they were confident it wouldn't need editing. Then you did something inconvenient. You didn't match the ending they expected. What made it unsettling wasn't just that you succeeded, but that you did it without signaling it ahead of time. No constant updates, no public build-up, no dramatic warning that change was coming. One day the results were simply there. That kind of surprise doesn't feel inspiring at first. It feels disorienting. It forces people to reread everything they thought they knew about you and realize they skimmed. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people don't underestimate others by accident. They do it because it makes their own position feel safer. If they decide early that you're not a threat, they can relax. They can delay their own effort. They can stay where they are without pressure. When you disrupt that story, you don't just improve your own standing, you remove their excuse. That's why the reaction is often delayed. Instead of instant praise, there's silence, side comments, and sudden curiosity. They're recalculating. They're trying to figure out how someone they had already categorized slipped past the limits they assumed were fixed. What really shifts is the power dynamic. When someone proves the story wrong, they quietly take control of how they're seen going forward. People stop predicting your ceiling. They start watching your next move more carefully, not because you demanded attention, but because you earned unpredictability. Being underestimated is comfortable for everyone except the person living inside it. Breaking that assumption creates friction, but it also creates respect, not the loud kind, the cautious kind, the kind where people choose their words around you now. You didn't change who you were. You changed what was possible in their minds. And once a story is proven false, it can never be fully trusted again. Number 2, you succeeded without following the community's unspoken rules. Every group, every circle, every community has invisible boundaries. They aren't written down and they aren't openly discussed, but everyone knows them. Who should speak, who should lead, who should fail quietly, and who should be tolerated at a distance. These rules exist to keep comfort in place and to protect egos. Most people follow them instinctively because stepping outside invites judgment, gossip, or worse, exclusion. Then you did the unexpected. You didn't wait for approval, you didn't ask permission, and you didn't play by their timelines. You didn't even perform the expected struggle or dramatize your journey. You just moved. And because of that, the community had no choice but to sit up and pay attention. You didn't just bend the rules, you ignored them entirely. That kind of action is disarming. People aren't used to it, so they scramble to understand it, to categorize it, to explain it away. The beauty of breaking these unspoken rules is that it exposes the fragility of the system itself. Everyone around you suddenly notices how arbitrary the boundaries were. They realize that progress wasn't meant to be granted, but earned according to someone else's idea of timing and decorum. Your success didn't just move you forward, it forced the community to acknowledge the limitations they had quietly accepted. And that's what makes your rise so disruptive. It doesn't just elevate you, it creates a ripple of self-reflection in those who watched. People start questioning their own choices, their own adherence to rules that may have held them back. Some feel inspired, others defensive, and many quietly envious. The tension is subtle but undeniable. By stepping outside the pre-approved path, you revealed a fundamental truth. Progress and achievement belong to the bold, not the cautious. Communities are structured around comfort zones and assumptions, but your actions proved that neither is required for success. You didn't wait for a green light. You became the signal. And now, the rules exist only as suggestions, and everyone else is left playing catch-up. Number 3, you exposed how little effort most people are actually giving. Most people like to think they're trying. They tell themselves they're putting in the work, that they're serious about change, growth, or success. But effort is often performative, measured in appearances rather than results. People show up, talk about what they're doing, post updates, nod along in meetings, and call that enough. Deep down, they're protecting comfort and avoiding accountability, and it usually goes unnoticed, until someone quietly does the work that actually matters. That's exactly what you did. You didn't just talk about ambition, you acted on it. You didn't wait for the perfect moment or for approval from anyone else. You moved in the background, consistently, without the noise of explanation or drama. And the results, they couldn't be ignored. Suddenly, all the half-hearted effort around you was exposed for what it was. The same people who assumed they were keeping pace had nothing to show, and that's a shocking thing to witness, not just for them, but for anyone invested in the illusion of progress. Your success became a mirror. People realized that the standard they had settled for wasn't actually impressive, it was convenient. The truth you demonstrated was uncomfortable. Real results come from relentless, often invisible effort, not from comfort or appearances. You didn't just move ahead, you revealed the gap between doing enough to feel good and doing enough to actually achieve. That revelation forces people to reassess their own habits, their own excuses, and their own definitions of work. What makes this moment even more striking is that it didn't require confrontation. You didn't need to call anyone out, and you didn't need to boast. By simply delivering, you forced the comparison silently. People couldn't argue with consistency, and they couldn't dispute results. The quiet truth of your effort became louder than any words. In exposing how little effort most people are willing to give, you didn't just succeed. You redefined the baseline. You set a standard that others now measure themselves against, whether they like it or not. And that's why communities start seeing you as someone exceptional, even if they can't admit it out loud. Number 4, you succeeded in private before anyone had time to sabotage it. One of the quietest superpowers a person can have is timing. Most people measure success by noise, the announcements, the posts, the celebrations. But the truth is, real achievement often grows in silence. You understood that instinctively. While others were busy critiquing, comparing, or plotting how to keep you in line, you were quietly moving forward. By the time anyone noticed, the outcome was already inevitable. That's what makes it so shocking to everyone around you. There's a moment when people realize you've passed them without fanfare, without begging for attention, without fitting into their expectations. In that pause, they scramble. They try to understand how someone they underestimated managed to quietly outpace them. But by then it's too late. The project is complete. The skill is mastered. The change is undeniable. The window for interference has closed and they can't do a thing about it. This approach also shows an unusual kind of discipline. It's easy to perform for approval, to move visibly and expect applause along the way. Doing it in private requires patience, focus, and a willingness to resist external validation. You weren't motivated by recognition or fear of being left behind. You were motivated by the result itself, and that's a dangerous combination for anyone trying to predict your path. The subtle brilliance of succeeding in private is that it exposes another truth. Most attempts at greatness fail, not because the goal is impossible, but because people let external noise distract them. Critics, naysayers, and observers all exist to slow momentum, but by ignoring them, you preserved your own energy and timeline. You didn't just avoid sabotage, you removed the opportunity for it entirely. When the results finally emerge, they carry a weight that spectacle cannot match. There's no preemptive defense, no prepared narrative, and no excuses. People can't diminish what's already done. That's why your quiet, private movement is not just a strategy, it's a statement. You became undeniable before anyone had the chance to argue otherwise, and that is the kind of accomplishment that changes perception forever. Number 5, you didn't become loud when you became capable. There's a strange expectation in most communities that when someone grows, they must announce it. Success is supposed to come with fanfare, explanations, and constant reminders of how far you've come. Most people follow that script because it feels safer. It signals progress without threatening anyone else. But you didn't follow it. You grew quietly, steadily, and without seeking validation, and that's what made it impossible to ignore. By refusing to be loud, you made your results speak for themselves. People couldn't argue with what had already been done, and there was no performance to undermine or dismiss. Every subtle improvement, every step forward, became more powerful precisely because it wasn't accompanied by a narrative. The contrast between what everyone expected and what actually existed was startling. That quiet confidence has a gravity all its own. It pulls attention not by noise, but by undeniable presence. This kind of restraint is rare because most people mistake visibility for influence. They think the louder they are, the more credible they become. What you demonstrated instead is that real capability doesn't require justification. You didn't have to broadcast your progress or explain your methods. The fact that you could continue advancing while staying composed forced others to reassess their assumptions. They had to acknowledge your skill without the usual cues of self-promotion. That acknowledgement is deeper, more grudging, and more permanent than praise shouted into the void. By staying quiet, you also created tension. People notice the calm, the measured steps, the refusal to perform, and it unsettles them. It exposes the performative nature of everyone else's noise. They realize their own effort often comes with theatrics, and in comparison, your results appear sharper, cleaner, and more authentic. In the end, not becoming loud turned your growth into a statement, not a spectacle. You became someone whose progress commands attention because it cannot be ignored, explained away, or diminished. Quiet capability is more than just subtlety. It's power, and in that silence you redefined how people perceive what it means to truly succeed. Number 6, you made excuses look expensive. Excuses are cheap. They're convenient little stories people tell themselves to feel better about not moving forward, to justify half-hearted effort, or to avoid being uncomfortable. Most people rely on them constantly, as if repeating the same line will somehow make progress happen on its own. But then you arrived, quietly proving that results don't come from justification. They come from action. And suddenly, every excuse in the room looked overpriced. The real power of what you did is that it exposed how flimsy excuses really are. They might shield people from guilt or embarrassment, but they don't build skills, wealth, or respect. When you moved forward without them, it forced everyone else to notice that their own justifications were excuses in disguise. What used to feel like clever reasoning now looked lazy. What used to feel like strategy now looked like fear. And that makes people uncomfortable because it reflects their own inaction. Your progress didn't just highlight your effort, it highlighted the cost of doing nothing. Every time someone said, "I can't because," your results quietly answered, "You could, if you actually tried." And that quiet answer is louder than any argument. People often get defensive in these moments because nobody likes seeing the truth about themselves reflected in someone else's achievements. You didn't confront anyone, you didn't call out laziness, and you didn't make them feel small. You just moved. And that movement made excuses look heavy, unnecessary, and ultimately self-defeating. This is why communities start paying attention when someone like you rises. Not because you explained how or bragged or demanded recognition, but because your results changed the conversation without saying a word. Excuses no longer carry weight when confronted with undeniable progress. People begin to respect what can be done, not what is merely talked about. You made action look effortless and excuses look costly. And in that shift, you didn't just win. You rewrote the value system everyone around you had been relying on. You became proof that accountability is far more effective than justification, and nothing else can compete with it. Number 7, you didn't wait for confidence. You moved while uncertain. Most people wait for the perfect moment, the ideal conditions, or the unshakable feeling of confidence before taking action. They tell themselves they need clarity, readiness, or a green light from the universe. But confidence is a byproduct, not a prerequisite. You understood that instinctively. You acted while unsure, while the path ahead was foggy, while the outcome was still unknown. And that's what made your progress so disruptive. Moving while uncertain is uncomfortable. It forces you to rely on discipline, instinct, and raw persistence, rather than the comforting illusion of certainty. That discomfort scares most people, so they postpone action endlessly, convincing themselves that waiting will protect them from failure. Meanwhile, you kept moving. Every step you took while unsure was a step that others weren't willing to take. And the result? You outpaced those who were waiting to feel ready. This approach also shifts perception in a powerful way. People notice courage in motion more than they notice confidence in words. When someone takes decisive action without certainty, it reveals a resilience and boldness that can't be faked. Others see it, even if they don't understand it, and it forces them to recalibrate their assumptions. The person who seemed quiet, hesitant, or ordinary is suddenly moving forward while everyone else is still planning, debating, or hesitating. There's an elegance in it too. You didn't wait for validation from your own feelings or from others. You treated the unknown not as a barrier, but as a challenge to overcome in real time. That willingness to act under uncertainty creates momentum that's self-sustaining. Each small decision builds confidence retroactively. Each result proves that action itself generates clarity. By moving while uncertain, you became proof that progress doesn't wait for readiness. You rewrote the rule most people live by, that you need to feel capable before you act. In doing so, you showed that true courage is not the absence of doubt. It's moving forward despite it. And that is what turns silent effort into undeniable power. Number 8, you changed without asking the community to change with you. Most people believe growth is a group activity. They expect approval, guidance, or at least acknowledgement before taking a significant step forward. They measure progress not just by results, but by whether their circle of influence nods along. But you didn't wait for permission. You evolved on your own terms, in your own time, without dragging anyone else along. That independence is rare, and that rarity is what makes it so striking. Changing without asking others to adapt forces people to confront their own limitations. Suddenly, the old dynamics no longer apply. Those who assumed familiarity or control over your actions are left recalculating. Your transformation doesn't require consensus, validation, or applause. It exists because you allowed it to exist. And that autonomy disrupts expectations, making it impossible for the community to comfortably place you in the same category as before. There's also a subtle power in this kind of evolution. People are often blind to their own resistance to change. They get stuck in patterns of judgment, comparison, and expectation. By moving forward without their participation, you expose the truth. Growth is personal, not collective. No one can authorize it, no one can delay it, and no one can limit it once the decision is made internally. Your progress becomes undeniable precisely because it doesn't rely on their approval or participation. The effect is both humbling and unsettling for observers. They witness your evolution without being invited, without being prepared, and without having influence over the process. That forces respect, grudging admiration, and in some cases, silent frustration. But more importantly, it demonstrates that true transformation is self-contained. You carry it with you, and it doesn't need to be broadcast, negotiated, or explained. By choosing to change independently, you redefined the terms of engagement. You became the author of your own story while everyone else was still debating the plot. That freedom, that quiet defiance, is what positions you as an unsung champion, the person who proves that real progress doesn't require permission, it requires action. Number 9, you made discipline look simple, not dramatic. Most people misunderstand discipline. They picture it as struggle, as tension, as sacrifice displayed for everyone to see. They expect long stories of pain, visible stress, or emotional turmoil as proof that someone is working hard. But you showed something far more powerful. Discipline doesn't have to be loud, exhausting, or performative. It can be quiet, consistent, and deceptively simple, and that is what makes it so extraordinary. Your approach stripped away the theatrics that everyone else relied on to measure effort. While people were busy dramatizing their hustle, you were quietly showing up, doing the work, and letting results accumulate. That contrast is unsettling because it exposes how much of the effort people glorify is more about appearances than results. Your discipline was invisible, but its effects were impossible to ignore. You didn't need to post about it, complain about it, or dramatize it. You just executed, and the outcomes did the talking. What makes simple discipline so threatening to observers is that it rewrites expectations. When success is accompanied by noise, everyone has a chance to measure themselves against the performance. When it's quiet and effortless in appearance, it forces them to question their own work ethic. They realize that the real difference between someone who achieves and someone who doesn't isn't talent, motivation, or luck. It's consistency applied without attention-seeking or excuses. There's also a subtle elegance in your method. Simplicity in discipline communicates mastery, control, and clarity. It signals that you're focused on what matters, not on impressing others or proving a point. People are drawn to it, partly because it's rare, partly because it's effective, and partly because it exposes the inefficiency of overcomplicated effort. By making discipline look simple, you didn't just succeed, you redefined what it means to work hard. You showed that real power lies not in performance, but in consistency, in quiet precision, and in letting results speak louder than any story. That's why your presence is disruptive, inspiring, and unforgettable. Number 10. You outgrew people who thought proximity meant ownership. There's a common illusion in every community. Familiarity is mistaken for entitlement. Some people assume that because they've been around, because they've witnessed your beginnings, or because they've shared small pieces of your journey, they somehow own your progress. They believe knowing you early gives them rights to influence, opinion, or even control over your trajectory. You didn't buy into that. You moved forward on your own terms, and in doing so, you outgrew anyone who thought proximity equaled ownership. This kind of growth is both subtle and seismic. You didn't announce it, you didn't justify it, and you didn't wait for anyone to approve your next move. People who expected to shepherd your development suddenly found themselves irrelevant. Their advice, their judgments, their assumptions, all of it lost weight in the face of your independent progress. By choosing to prioritize your own direction over their expectations, you silently forced a reevaluation of relationships, hierarchies, and influence. The power of outgrowing people lies in the clarity it creates. You start recognizing which connections were supportive and which were conditional. You see who cheered for your comfort rather than your potential. And by stepping beyond those invisible boundaries, you prove that growth doesn't require permission or validation. It belongs to the person willing to take the steps, not to the spectators who claim early access. That shift is unsettling for anyone who believed in their own ownership over your story. It forces reflection. If proximity doesn't equal influence, what really matters? Results, vision, consistency. The very people who tried to tether you are left recalculating their value in your world. By outgrowing those who underestimated the distinction between closeness and control, you didn't just advance, you redefined the rules of engagement. You became someone who cannot be contained by someone else's assumptions. You made it clear that your life, your growth, and your achievements are yours alone, and anyone who thought otherwise is now watching from the sidelines, witnessing a reality they never thought possible. Number 11. You didn't explain yourself while climbing. Most people feel the need to narrate their journey. They justify every move, explain every setback, and provide context for every small victory. It's almost as if progress without a story isn't valid. You didn't do that. You climbed quietly, steadily, and deliberately without offering anyone a running commentary. And that restraint is more powerful than any explanation could ever be. By refusing to explain yourself, you forced people to focus on the results instead of the reasoning. They couldn't dissect your motives or dissect your process because you weren't providing any material to analyze. What they saw was pure action, stripped of distraction, and that made it impossible to dismiss. The absence of narrative creates a tension that commands attention. People instinctively try to fill in the blanks, only to realize that their assumptions were wrong. That quiet ambiguity makes your success feel larger, sharper, and more undeniable. There's also an elegance in not explaining. It signals self-sufficiency and confidence. You weren't seeking validation, approval, or sympathy. You weren't performing for anyone's understanding. You were accountable only to yourself, and that is an intimidating standard for others to witness. It subtly forces respect, because it's easier to admire someone when they aren't seeking admiration. Your silence also exposes the difference between action and talk. People who constantly explain themselves are often covering uncertainty, inconsistency, or lack of direction. By contrast, your refusal to provide commentary shows that your progress stands on its own. It doesn't need justification. It doesn't need framing. It simply exists, undeniable and self-contained. In the end, not explaining yourself while climbing made you untouchable in ways words never could. You became someone whose growth is impossible to debate, whose results speak for themselves, and whose presence demands recognition without a single sentence of self-promotion. That kind of quiet authority is rare, disruptive, and unforgettable. Number 12. You forced people to question who they underestimated. Underestimation is comfortable. People like to assign limits to others because it protects their own sense of order. It's easier to think they can't do it than to constantly measure what's possible. But when you stepped beyond expectations, you didn't just succeed. You shattered the assumptions everyone had made about you. That's when the real disruption begins. By proving them wrong, you forced people to confront a truth they often avoid. Their judgments are flawed. Every achievement you displayed became evidence that their predictions were not just inaccurate, but entirely misplaced. That kind of awakening is unsettling because it forces self-reflection. If they were wrong about you, who else in their lives, work, or social circle have they misjudged? The ripple effect spreads far beyond your own progress, touching perceptions, biases, and hidden insecurities. The power in this is subtle but undeniable. People rarely enjoy admitting they miscalculated. Instead, they adjust quietly, recalibrating their assumptions while trying to maintain appearances. But your rise doesn't allow easy reinterpretation. You didn't simply exceed expectations, you redefined them. That forces a mental reckoning. What else might they have discounted too soon? Who else has potential that they've overlooked because of comfort, habit, or prejudice? What makes it even more impressive is how effortless it can appear. You didn't need to draw attention to your breakthroughs or highlight your victories. The results themselves delivered the message. Every milestone quietly punctuated the error of underestimation, making those who doubted you reassess not only their view of you, but the way they evaluate everyone around them. By forcing people to question who they underestimated, you became a living example of unpredictability and potential. You revealed the danger of assumptions and the value of paying attention to what's real, not what's expected. That kind of disruption is rare. It doesn't just earn respect, it earns attention, recalibrates relationships, and cements your status as someone impossible to categorize or overlook. Number 13, you made self-respect visible through boundaries. Self-respect is quiet power, and boundaries are its language. Most people talk about respect as if it's something you demand from others, but real respect starts with yourself. You understood that. You stopped over-giving, over-explaining, and over-compromising. You recognized that every time you bent for someone else unnecessarily, you lost a piece of your own authority. By setting limits, you made it visible. You aren't just capable, you're intentional about who and what occupies your space. That visibility is magnetic and disruptive. Boundaries aren't just about saying no, they're about signaling value. When people realize that your time, energy, and attention aren't automatically theirs to claim, they begin to notice the weight of your presence. Suddenly, interactions are measured differently. Requests are considered more carefully. Opinions are weighed more seriously. Your self-respect forces others to adjust because it challenges the unspoken assumption that you exist to serve their expectations. There's also a subtle lesson in this. Many people mistake compliance for loyalty or availability for commitment. You flip that script without confrontation. By maintaining boundaries, you communicated that alignment with you isn't about proximity or familiarity. It's about mutual respect. Your standards became a filter, separating those who truly value your presence from those who only claim it as a convenience. What makes this so profound is how visible it becomes in daily life. People notice when you refuse to tolerate nonsense, when you stop over-explaining, or when you protect your time with precision. They might call it confidence, assertiveness, or even coldness, but underneath, it's simple. You've made self-respect unavoidable. Your actions demonstrate that growth and integrity can coexist with quiet control, and that anyone trying to bypass your boundaries will notice it immediately. By making self-respect visible through boundaries, you didn't just protect yourself, you elevated your status. You became someone who commands attention and recalibrates expectations without saying a word. In every room, conversation, and interaction, your boundaries speak louder than any explanation ever could. You became proof that respect isn't given, it's earned, and it starts with the way you treat yourself. Number 14, you became proof that timing matters more than permission. Most people wait for the right moment, or at least what they believe is the right moment, to act. They wait for approval, confirmation, or the nod from someone they think matters. That's comfortable because it creates the illusion of safety. But timing isn't about comfort or permission. It's about action. You understood that instinctively. You moved when it was necessary, not when someone else deemed it acceptable. That alone sets you apart. Acting without permission doesn't just make you bold, it makes you effective. By refusing to wait for consensus, you seized opportunities while others debated, hesitated, or sought validation. Your results didn't depend on applause, they depended on momentum. People around you might have expected a pause, a request, or even an explanation, but there was none. You acted, and by acting at the right time, you made approval irrelevant. This approach has a unique power. Timing carries more influence than any argument because it catches people off guard. When you move at the exact moment that matters, it amplifies impact. By the time anyone notices, the shift has already happened. The results are undeniable, and the narrative has been rewritten before observers have a chance to intervene. It's not just speed, it's strategic presence, the kind that forces attention and recalibration. There's also a quiet lesson in self-reliance embedded in this. You showed that waiting for others to validate your decisions only delays progress. Permission can be withheld, misused, or slow to arrive. Timing, on the other hand, is in your hands. By mastering your own schedule and acting decisively, you proved that real growth isn't about consensus, it's about initiative. By becoming proof that timing matters more than permission, you demonstrated a truth most people never fully grasp. The right action at the right moment is more powerful than endless approval. You didn't just move forward, you rewrote expectations, disrupted assumptions, and positioned yourself as someone whose presence and results cannot be postponed or ignored. Timing became your ally, and in that alliance you became unstoppable. Every step you've taken, every move you've made quietly, has done more than just elevate you. It's rewritten the rules of how people perceive potential, effort, and success. You didn't follow scripts, you didn't wait for approval, and you didn't perform for recognition. You disrupted assumptions, exposed hidden truths, and made personal growth visible in ways that can't be ignored. Each point, Whether it was breaking the story they had written about you, acting while uncertain, or setting boundaries that demand respect, has built a presence that is undeniable. You've shown that true power comes from consistency, self-reliance, timing, and silent mastery. The community may not have seen it coming, and that's what makes you extraordinary. You've become the unsung champion, not because the world shouted your name, but because your actions made it impossible to overlook. This isn't just a story of achievement. It's a blueprint for standing out in a world that prefers predictability and comfort. It's proof that real influence doesn't require validation, drama, or consent. It's about moving when others hesitate, performing when others doubt, and growing while the world underestimates you. The lessons here are deep, undeniable, and applicable. When you own your journey, respect your boundaries, and act decisively, you shift not only your own life, but the way everyone around you perceives what is possible. If this video opened your eyes or gave you a new perspective, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button to stay connected, drop a comment with your thoughts or experiences, and share this with someone who needs to see it. Every like, every share, and every comment helps build a community of people who refuse to settle for the ordinary. Let's keep growing, keep surprising, and keep rewriting the rules together. Stay awakened, chosen ones.